Under the twin sons of Boone to Eve, destinies twist as a young boy with storm gray eyes gambles everything not just for freedom, but for family. A single cube spins through the air, deciding between a mother's chains and a brother's future. But the Force doesn't play fair. A Jedi's subtle touch tips fate, freeing the older sibling, not the one expected. Beneath the roar of pod racers and political masks, a quiet bond blooms between the conflicted teen and a veiled queen. Their thoughts brushing like wind over sand. Yet the past won't stay buried, visions whisper, voices echo, and questions rise like heat from Tatooine's dunes. Was he born of chance, or crafted by prophecy? As the younger one races for hope, the elder walks a path lit by dreams and doubt, chased by the shadow of a destiny too large for one soul alone. Is this conversation helpful so far? She was light in human form, gentle even to those who'd owned her. No hate, no vengeance. If someone starved, she would give them her food, so long as her sons had eaten. She had taught them this. The galaxy's true sickness was that no one paused to help, so he made his choice. A quiet flick of his fingers, the Force obeyed, and the cube landed on red. If the boy won the race, their mother would walk free. But beside him, another presence stirred subtle, cloaked in Jedi calm. The cube tipped again, unnaturally. It now showed blue. His heart dropped. He had gambled everything to give his family a future beyond dust and chains. But the Force had chosen a different path. "You won the toss, Outlander," came the sneer, sealing the moment. He snarled with irritation, dismissing the idea that they'd win the race, just as a swarm of dusty kids poured into the hangar alongside Anakin, Padme, Shmi, and two lumpy Eopies dragging the pod and engines. Glaring, the Toydarian flared his nostrils at Revan, warning him to stop his friend from betting before he ended up owning him too, then buzzed away with a huff, cutting through the crowd of children and halting beside Anakin. "If you're still alive after the race, come see me, boy," he snapped, his wings flicking as he vanished into the shadows, leaving Anakin blinking in confusion atop the giant beast, Padme steady behind him. He turned to his older brother, owlish and unsure, and asked, "Did I do something wrong?" Revan simply shook his head. "Number." Revan gave his little brother a confident grin, promising answers after the race once Anakin left that smug dug in the dust. The younger mirrored the smirk, both ready for the moment ahead. Meanwhile, Padme's voice echoed in Revan's mind, teasing him about his secrecy and hinting she would have raced herself had she known what was truly at stake. Standing nearby, the bonded boy reminded the cloaked girl beside Anakin of his brother's skills, then pressed her on a detail who claimed Anakin had never finished a race? With a knowing glance toward Qui-Gon, Padme answered simply, "He did." She was light in human form, gentle even to those who'd owned her. No hate, no vengeance. If someone starved, she would give them her food, so long as her sons had eaten. She had taught them this. The galaxy's true sickness was that no one paused to help, so he made his choice. A quiet flick of his fingers, the Force obeyed, and the cube landed on red. If the boy won the race, their mother would walk free. But beside him, another presence stirred, subtle, cloaked in Jedi calm. The cube tipped again, unnaturally. It now showed blue. His heart dropped. He had gambled everything to give his family a future beyond dust and chains. But the Force had chosen a different path. "You won the toss, Outlander," came the sneer, sealing the moment. After overhearing him mutter something beneath his breath, the handmaiden fell silent, her expression unreadable. Revan, catching the shift in her gaze, asked if she was all right. Her response was gentle but piercing. She felt sad. The moment cracked something inside him. He began to apologize, the edges of guilt surfacing. But before the words could fully form, the brunette cut him off, leaving the apology suspended, unfinished, in the air between them. The silence that followed spoke louder than any confession, as if both sensed that sorrow wasn't caused by the moment it had been waiting there all along. Revan tried to deflect, insisting he wasn't sad, brushing off emotion with sharp retorts and a distant gaze, but Padme saw right through him. Her voice cracked like glass under pressure, accusing him of hiding behind silence while she had once leaned on him in her own despair. She called him out, naming the ache he refused to acknowledge, the heartbreak he buried under layers of control. Revan dodged again, feigning ignorance, eyes drifting toward Qui-Gon, speaking to his younger brother, anything to avoid the truth Padme had spoken aloud. Is this conversation helpful so far? Revan looked past his brother and met Padme's eyes, soft, questioning, insistent, and finally let the truth fall from his lips with a weight that crushed his chest. He had freed Anakin. Padme blinked, surprised by his sorrow, asking why he wasn't celebrating. After all, wasn't saving his brother worth everything? That's when Revan admitted it, he sold HK. Her voice dropped to a whisper of realization. He hadn't just given up a droid, he had given up something he'd built, protected, maybe even loved like a son. She offered quiet sympathy, but Revan's storm gray eyes stayed locked in the distance. That wasn't what haunted him most, though it ached, he knew he'd have to live with it. He said it while thinking of his loyal droid, but just because he claimed he'd trade Anakin for the machine didn't mean he ever planned to. Illusion, after all, was the Jedi's oldest trick. If the Toydarian believed HK was his, then Revan could free his brother and still keep his protector watching over their mother, if the race was won. So another bet was made. Red for their mother's freedom, blue for Revan's. The cube hit blue. Padme finished the thought for him, sensing why his mood had turned so hollow. Yet even with that outcome, she knew his mother would never have let her children remain in her place. Revan's voice sharpened. His mother deserved joy. Enslaved since childhood, she had earned the right to choose her own path. And in secret, with a twist of the Force, he had tried to rig fate, he made it land on red. Revan didn't need to say it out loud. He let the dice speak, nudging fate with the Force so it landed blue. The girl looked at him, confused. Why would he do that? Revan stood with arms crossed, gaze steady. He wants me to go with him to Coruscant, to talk to the Jedi about my dreams. Her brow knit, curiosity sparking in her eyes. What's so special about your dream? He gave a faint smirk. I'll tell you later, he replied, prompting a small pout from her. Besides, people are going to think we're weird if we just keep staring at each other. She sighed, all right. Padme crossed her arms, still pouting, but gave a reluctant nod. But this isn't over, Revan. He tilted his head, eyes glinting with dry humor. Clearly, we know who wears the trousers in this dynamic. Her shout of his name only deepened his laugh as her cheeks flared crimson. Hours later, engines roared across the Boonta track while racers made their final checks beneath Jabba's watchful glare. Anakin, slipping through the crowd, found his racer and, more importantly, his mother waiting with Padme and Revan, who fine-tuned the craft's final adjustments. She pulled her son into a fierce hug, her face lined by sun and time but steady as ever. He held her tightly, comforted by that familiar strength. When she gently pushed him back, her tired eyes found his calm and resolute, the quiet courage of someone who had let go many times but never completely. He could see it, she was trying to be strong, the way she always was on race day, but behind her eyes flickered something fragile, fear. She clutched his shoulders tightly, her voice barely holding steady, "Be safe, Ani," and as if afraid letting go would make him vanish, she held on just a moment longer. Over her shoulder, his older brother stepped in, resting a steady hand on her, anchoring them both. "He'll be fine, Mom," came the calm reassurance, followed by a glance toward the youngest Skywalker. "Right, Ani?" A heartbeat passed. Then a gulp, a stiff nod, and a cracked voice. "Right!" Shmi gave her eldest a reassuring smile, then stepped away, leaving the brothers surrounded by a roaring sea of spectators, but sharing a moment of rare quiet. Revan, cool as ever, eyed his little brother. "Nervous?" he asked. Anakin stood straighter, admitting, a little, just as he caught sight of Padme moving gracefully through the crowd with her mismatched entourage. The weight of the galaxy clung to his small shoulders, and he feared failure not just in the race, but in front of her. Revan, ever the older sibling with a smirk ready, raised an eyebrow. "Anybody? Or a certain girl?" he teased, watching Anakin squirm, cheeks burning red. It wasn't subtle the way Anakin lit up when she was near, how he clutched at every moment to hold her hand, showing off his droid, stealing glances when she wasn't looking, and turning away in a flurry of blushes when she was, "What?" Anakin stammers, cheeks flaring like a reactor coil about to blow his brother somehow found out about her. "I don't know what you're talking about, I just don't want to let Qui-Gon down is all," he insists, voice cracking like a faulty droid. His brother just smirks, tossing out a sly, "Whatever you say, Ani," and that earns him a death glare sharp enough to slice through Durasteel. Then comes the bomb. "Guess you won't mind if I ask her out then." Anakin's glare collapses into a full scowl. "You can't!" And just like that, the sandstorm inside him erupts. "What?" Anakin stammers, cheeks flaring like a reactor coil about to blow his brother somehow found out about her. I don't know what you're talking about. I just don't want to let Qui-Gon down is all, he insists, voice cracking like a faulty droid. His brother just smirks, tossing out a sly, "Whatever you say, Ani," and that earns him a death glare sharp enough to slice through Durasteel. Then comes the bomb. Guess you won't mind if I ask her out then. Anakin's glare collapses into a full scowl. "You can't!" And just like that, the sandstorm inside him erupts. Revan promised him he was free now. Not because the race was over, but because Revan had already made the trade, already made the choice. As soon as Anakin crossed the finish line, they'd march to Watto and have the device removed. Anakin blinked in disbelief, his voice cracking, "I'm free?" Revan grinned, sharp and certain, letting the P and yep pop like a burst of sun through storm clouds. But before the moment could settle, she emerged from the crowd Padme, calm and radiant, drawing close like a breeze before dawn. She leaned in, pressing a kiss to Anakin's cheek so softly it silenced even his breath. A lump rose in his throat, unbidden, but there was no room for words. Her voice was barely audible, a whisper threaded with gravity. "You carry all our hopes." And Anakin, surrounded by engines and destiny, nodded with steel in his eyes. "I won't let you down." He thought his brother would stay, he hoped, even promised. But Anakin's voice trembled when he said it. "No, you won't." Confused and hurt, Revan blinked, asking if he had done something wrong, if he was being sent away to a new master. The question struck like a quiet storm, but instead of answering with sorrow, Revan placed a hand in his brother's dusty blonde hair, ruffling it with a smile that masked deeper pain. "I would never give you away," he said. In that moment, beneath the desert's rising heat, brotherhood spoke louder than chains. Revan gave his word Anakin would be free. Not someday, now. Once the race was done, he'd take him straight to Watto and have the bomb removed. "I'm free?" Anakin asked, barely believing. "Yep," Revan replied, the P popping with mischief. But before emotion could settle, Padme emerged from the crowd, her smile cutting through the noise. She leaned in and kissed Anakin's cheek, gentle and warm, stirring a lump in his throat he didn't know was there. Her whisper, almost lost in the wind, carried the weight of their world. "You carry all our hopes." And with quiet strength he answered, "I won't let you down." He swallowed hard, voice catching as his heart pounded and her breath warmed his skin. She studied him, long and quiet, before leaning back with a sly smile. "Don't I get a kiss?" he asked, half joking, though his eyes searched hers. She rolled her eyes at him with that same smile, while the younger one beside them wasn't smiling at all. His scowl said it loud. Revan had just shattered the moment. "What for?" she teased, those dark eyes twinkling as she tilted her head, playful and sharp. "Annie's the one doing all the work." And just like that, Revan reminded her, "But I built the pod." As she pulled away from the weight of Revan's silent thoughts and drifted toward the edge of the platform where others waited, a young voice broke the tension. Anakin, wide-eyed and earnest, declared his future with her, a vow too big for his frame. Revan's gaze had lingered too long on her silhouette, but the spell cracked with a dry chuckle from above. He wasn't even through his first growth spurt. The moment soured fast as a shadow slithered in Sebulba, all sneer and stink, oozed venom toward Anakin, calling him bonded scum, daring him not to survive. Then he turned to Revan, lips curling with menace, as if writing a farewell in dust and spit. But Revan didn't flinch, just stared him down and promised, with fire in his voice, that this goodbye would never come. "You've given a beautifully specific image prompt structured like a triptych, and based on the content of the uploaded file talk6.txt, it appears your aesthetic leans toward a spiritual documentary times mythic realism style, deeply symbolic and emotionally resonant. Here's a visual breakdown for generating the image in that style, incorporating your segments and tone. Triptych concept: Einstein through the veil of time. Panel 1, the mystic physicist. Setting: a dark, timeless study room. Faint outlines of blackboard and ancient shelves. Einstein, full body, adult, worn clothes, chalk in hand. Light, a swirl of glowing chalk dust mimicking the space-time curve rises behind him like a silent aurora. Face, cosmic. Light illuminates his face, partially one-eye catching starlight, deeply focused. Mood, meditative, solemn. You feel like time is pausing around him. Panel 2, The Wandering Child. Setting: a quiet 19th century room, soft golden light from a window. Einstein, child, upper body, seated on floor, holding a small compass in cupped hands. Eyes: filled with awe, his world just shifted. Mood: eye-level intimacy. You're in the moment of awakening. Panel 3, the moral echo. Setting: high shot, Einstein, a black silhouette before a burning horizon shaped like a mushroom cloud. Backdrop: faint, ghost-like musical notes and water-like ink tears blending into the sky. Mood: haunting, a soul burdened by the consequences of thought. Style: cinematic, spiritual tension. Reflection of legacy and guilt. Would you like me to now generate this image in AI using this structure and the cinematic comic noir Twin Suns Edition visual style as a baseline, or do you want it split into 3 separate images for clarity and use? Anakin stood firm, eyes locked in quiet defiance as the Dug sneered with venom, promising to bury him beneath the dust of the racetrack. The taunts dripped with cruelty, music of screams, a grave in the dirt, but Revan cut through it with biting calm, mocking the Dug's empty boasts. He called out the cheat behind the swagger, exposing the truth everyone knew. The Dug had never won without deceit. The Dug's eyes burned back, spitting a warning that only the strongest survive, gaze shifting to the two brothers like a predator sizing up prey, and the weak perish. The words hang in the dusty air as the rival's sneer sharpens. And yet you're still here, Kung. Revan's eyes flash, but he doesn't flinch. The Dug has baited him, and he takes it with silent fury. Why don't you get out of here before I make you? The other leans in, mockingly intrigued. Oh, do entertain me, bound one. What exactly will you do to make me? Revan's smirk returns, colder now. Well, I may not dine with Lord Jabba, but I'm pretty sure he wouldn't love you ruining the race he bankrolled. That hits. The Dug's nostrils flare, eyes narrowing. But before he can bark back, Revan lets the silence sharpen the threat until the Dug hisses, vowing venomously, if word gets back to Jabba, I'll be paying your mother a visit. Is there a problem here? Qui! Gon's voice cut through the tension like a blade, stern, calm, but alert as his hand landed on Revan's shoulder, sensing a dangerous fury rising that echoed ghosts of past failures. The Dug, snarling with disdain, fired back. Nothing you need concern yourself with, human. Before stomping away, casting one last venomous glance at Revan. Watching him retreat, Qui-Gon raised a brow. What was that about? He asked, eyes tracking the swaggering menace. Anakin shrugged with a hint of weariness, just his usual scare tactic. But Revan's jaw clenched, and Anakin turned toward him, confused and a little frustrated. Why did you have to antagonize him? Revan's answer came sharp and low, burning with protective fire. He threatened your life, Ani. Do you like this personality? Is there a problem here? Qui! Gon's voice cut through the tension like a blade, stern, calm, but alert as his hand landed on Revan's shoulder, sensing a dangerous fury rising that echoed ghosts of past failures. The Dug, snarling with disdain, fired back, nothing you need concern yourself with, human, before stomping away, casting one last venomous glance at Revan. Watching him retreat, Qui-Gon raised a brow. What was that about? He asked, eyes tracking the swaggering menace. Anakin shrugged with a hint of weariness, just his usual scare tactic. But Revan's jaw clenched, and Anakin turned toward him, confused and a little frustrated. Why did you have to antagonize him? Revan's answer came sharp and low, burning with protective fire. He threatened your life, Ani. Do you like this personality? He ruffled his little brother's hair with a crooked grin and barked, Make us proud and wreck that jerk for me, will ya? Anakin beamed with that signature spark and shot back, Do you even have to ask? Before hurling himself into a hug. Pressed against his brother's chest, his voice muffled as he whispered, Thanks for freeing me. Then came the hope, raw and wide-eyed. With the race money, we can free you and Mom finally leave Tatooine like we always dreamed. But Revan's heart twisted. He knew the truth, Anakin didn't. Even with a win, their mother wouldn't walk free. The dice hadn't rolled her way. Only the boys would be unshackled. She would remain behind, owned, while they chased a freedom that came chained in guilt. Is there a problem here? Why? Gon's voice cut through the tension like a blade, stern, calm, but alert as his hand landed on Revan's shoulder, sensing a dangerous fury rising that echoed ghosts of past failures. The Dug, snarling with disdain, fired back, "Nothing you need concern yourself with, human," before stomping away, casting one last venomous glance at Revan. Watching him retreat, Qui-Gon raised a brow. "What was that about?" he asked, eyes tracking the swaggering menace. Anakin shrugged with a hint of weariness. Just his usual scare tactic. But Revan's jaw clenched, and Anakin turned toward him, confused and a little frustrated. "Why did you have to antagonize him?" Revan's answer came sharp and low, burning with protective fire. "He threatened your life, Ani. Do you like this personality?" The Jedi Master's voice cut through the tension with calm precision. "Are you all set, Ani?" The boy gave a single nod, eyes burning with focus, no longer a child, but something on the edge of becoming. The Master watched him a moment longer, then spoke again, words laced with quiet urgency. "Remember, concentrate on the moment. Feel, don't think. Trust your instincts, they will serve you well." A hand rested gently on Anakin's shoulder. Not as a command, but a benediction. Not from a warrior, but a man who had seen too much and still hoped. "May the Force be with you, Annie." And with that, the Jedi turned away, his figure retreating toward the viewing platform, leaving Anakin Skywalker standing alone, small against the roar of the coming storm, but unshaken. "Is there a problem here?" Qui-Gon's voice cut through the tension like a blade stern, calm, but alert as his hand landed on Revan's shoulder, sensing a dangerous fury rising that echoed ghosts of past failures. The Dug, snarling with disdain, fired back, "Nothing you need concern yourself with, human," before stomping away, casting one last venomous glance at Revan. Watching him retreat, Qui-Gon raised a brow. "What was that about?" he asked, eyes tracking the swaggering menace. Anakin shrugged with a hint of weariness, just his usual scare tactic. But Revan's jaw clenched, and Anakin turned toward him, confused and a little frustrated. "Why did you have to antagonize him?" Revan's answer came sharp and low, burning with protective fire. "He threatened your life, Annie. Do you like this personality?" He tried to calm his mother, sensing how race day always wore her down. This was clearly where Anakin belonged, Qui-Gon observed, though his words to her, "All we can do now is hope for the best," offered little peace. No one needed reminding of what was at stake if the boy failed. Padme, cloaked in doubt, muttered how reckless Jedi could be, only to be swiftly interrupted by the rogue master, who coolly reminded her that the Queen trusted his judgment, though his gaze, pointed and steady, fell solely on her. She squinted her dark brown eyes and shot a glare straight at the Jedi Master, her voice low and sharp. "You presume too much." The boy beside her couldn't help but laugh, tossing out a teasing, "Somebody's grouchy." Without missing a beat, she redirected that deadly stare from the Jedi to the younger Skywalker. "You'll have to do better than that, Your Majesty." That stopped her cold. Caught off guard, she faltered he had seen through her disguise. She had masked her identity carefully, but he had caught the slip during their earlier conversation. "I've been watching you," he said, calm but certain. Her brows lifted. "You sound like a pervert." Revan didn't flinch when she cut in. He kept his focus, his tone steady, like she hadn't said a word. He admitted he'd been watching her, mimicking even, studying every motion and word. Sure, Naboo and Tatooine had their differences, but no handmaiden ever moved like that. The real crack in the disguise came when she almost said she was a prin, clearly about to say princess. She tried to push back, asking if a queen would dress in rags like hers, but Revan's eyes caught hers, sharp and certain he never said queen. He said princess. And now, it all made sense. The weight in her voice, the caution in her gaze. He saw it. He named it. Queen Amidala. She squinted her dark brown eyes and shot a glare straight at the Jedi Master, her voice low and sharp. "You presume too much." The boy beside her couldn't help but laugh, tossing out a teasing, "Somebody's grouchy." Without missing a beat, she redirected that deadly stare from the Jedi to the younger Skywalker. "You'll have to do better than that, Your Majesty." That stopped her cold. Caught off guard, she faltered he had seen through her disguise. She had masked her identity carefully, but he had caught the slip during their earlier conversation. "I've been watching you," he said, calm but certain. Her brows lifted. "You sound like a pervert." She looked at him with a gentle smile, and in that fleeting glance, he suddenly understood why someone like Anakin could be so captivated by her. There was no denying her beauty. But it wasn't just that. He was certain he had seen her before, not in a dream, but somewhere real, her voice echoing back to him with a slightly different accent. A flash of memory, a tight brown and cream bodysuit surged to the surface, and he quickly banished the image. Revan eyed the disguised queen, voice edged with suspicion, wondering aloud if this entire act was just a clever trap to expose his ship before she and her crew made off with everything. Her smile turned coy, teasing that unless he was in the market for dresses, he'd leave sorely disappointed. Revan quipped with a smirk, playing along. "Do you think it'll bring out the color of my eyes?" And the quiet giggle that echoed in his mind almost made the desert heat bearable. As the engines roared and the Boon to Eve race blazed forward, none of them noticed their hands still joined. Anakin, despite a rough start, surged ahead and claimed victory, knocking Sebulba out of the race after the Dug tried to sabotage him. Even Shmi, usually quiet as dusk, cheered with tearful joy at her son's first win. Back in the hangar, Qui-Gon moved with purpose, about to bargain for the freedom of both Revan and Anakin. Soon, they'd be unbound, leaving behind the dust of their past. And with midi-chlorian counts rivaling legends, the question whispered louder than ever. Which of them had the Force truly chosen? "You swindled me!" The Toydarian bursts into a furious flutter, eyes blazing as he accuses the Jedi of rigging the outcome. "You knew the boy would win. Somehow, you knew." But the Jedi, unshaken and half smiling, offers only a calm reminder. Whenever you gamble, my friend, you must be prepared to lose. And today wasn't your day. The smirk fades quickly, replaced by business. The parts must be delivered to the main hangar immediately, and the bonded boys released. He'll bring them to the shop later, along with the droid. Is this conversation helpful so far? Watto shoved his snout right into the Jedi's face and barked, "You can take the kid, but not Revan," his voice shaking with outrage. It wasn't a fair bet. But the Jedi didn't flinch. He stepped back, eyes narrowing into a look so cold it could freeze a sun, the kind of stare his old master would have nodded at in silent approval. "Would you care to discuss this with the Hutts?" he asked, voice calm but razor-edged. "I'm sure they'd be happy to settle the matter." Watto recoiled like he'd been slapped, his glare sharp with resentment. No, I want no more of your tricks," he snapped, waving him off like swatting flies from a wound. "Take the boys and be gone from here." The order cut through the tension as the figure turned his back and vanished into the sky. Left behind, the Jedi descended silently to the now abandoned racetrack, where droids scavenged through twisted wreckage like ants over bone. Among them, Revan stood alone by his battered pod, fingers tracing damage as if reading a scarred memory. From the shadows, Qui-Gon watched, surrounded by Padme, Shmi, and the droids, his mind turning inward. Anakin crept over, guilt in his steps, and Revan's glance over his shoulder held no judgment, only quiet recognition. As the brothers reunited, the Jedi's thoughts returned to those impossible blood samples. 20,000. Not fathered, but formed. Conceived not by man, but by the Force itself. Two boys, both placed, not born. And as the sun set over the dust-choked plains, only one question haunted him. Which of them was the prophecy's true design? Buried in an ancient holocron once found during his training under a former master, he'd read the prophecy like a tale out of Legend One Life, born to bring balance. Most dismissed it as myth, but now the question pulsed louder than ever. Was it Anakin or Revan? With their departure from the desert world looming, the story held back a beat not for spectacle, but for soul. A goodbye to the mother who shaped them couldn't be rushed. Next, they would head toward the shining towers of Coruscant, where destinies collide and shadows stretch. And yes, a masked hunter with burning eyes would soon step into the light. As for skipping the famous race, well, it had nothing new to offer this time, and Revan was never in it anyway. This story, it's his. Buried in an ancient holocron once found during his training under a former master, he'd read the prophecy like a tale out of Legend One Life, born to bring balance. Most dismissed it as myth, but now the question pulsed louder than ever. Was it Anakin or Revan? With their departure from the desert world looming, the story held back a beat not for spectacle, but for soul. A goodbye to the mother who shaped them couldn't be rushed. Next, they would head toward the shining towers of Coruscant, where destinies collide and shadows stretch. And yes, a masked hunter with burning eyes would soon step into the light. As for skipping the famous race, well, it had nothing new to offer this time. And Revan was never in it anyway. This story, it's his. As dawn rises over the Boon to Eve Classic, destinies collide in the shifting sands. A boy once seen as a scavenger now, Revan, The prodigal knight barters away his most loyal creation to win his brother's freedom, only to have fate twist again when a Jedi's unseen hand decides otherwise. A mother remains bound, a brother set free, and a bond forms between two minds. Padme's whispered thoughts now echoing in Revan's paw. Haunted by dreams of masks and echoes in the Force, Revan begins to sense that he wasn't born, he was placed. While Anakin races toward hope, Revan stares into the storm of prophecy, and Qui-Gon Jinn wonders which of these two boys the Force truly chose or cursed. Revan Skywalker stood quietly, his fingers brushing through the dust on the battered pod racer, a sigh escaping his lips. The machine, crafted from parts scavenged by him and his younger brother Anakin, had taken countless sleepless nights to assemble, yet now, in the wake of the boon to Eve, it lay in ruins. It wasn't a work of art like a swoop bike, but it had been theirs, their creation. A sound behind him drew his attention, and turning, he saw Anakin approaching with an apologetic look. "Is it bad?" Anakin asked. Revan paused, casting one final glance at the wreckage. "Well, it could be worse," he replied with a small smirk, though the weight of the situation hung between them. Anakin, battered but breathing, managed a half-hearted smirk and muttered, "At least you're still alive," before his face soured with a memory he couldn't quite spit out. "No thanks to that, Doug," he added, his scowl deepening as flashes of sabotage from the race crossed his mind. Revan cracked a grin, sharp with pride and payback. Well, today he learned the hard way cheaters never prosper. That earned a rare smile from the normally reserved Skywalker, but it vanished the moment Qui-Gon returned, moving toward them with a calm gravity that made time slow. Anakin hadn't even noticed his departure, though it was obvious where he'd gone to seal the deal, or maybe to challenge fate itself. The Jedi knelt, hands on Anakin's shoulders, his voice low and warm like dusk on the dunes. "You're a bit worse for wear, Ani," he said, locking eyes. "But you did well." Shmi's voice trembles in disbelief as she gazes up at the robed figure, her dark eyes flickering with a fragile hope that her children might finally escape the chains she regrets forging. While she and the Jedi speak in quiet urgency, Revan drifts toward the small group waiting nearby, his shadow stretching across sand still warm from the race. His glance catches the handmaiden whispering something that turns his brother's cheeks the color of setting suns, though the boy's grin refuses to fade. Meeting halfway, Anakin's bright smile collides with Revan's quieter relief. "That was quick," the blonde boy teases, the triumph of his first victory still dancing in his eyes. "Did he ask about freeing you and Mom too?" Revan hesitates, the answer an iron weight in his chest. "Not exactly, Ani," he murmurs, unwilling to crush the glow in his brother's face. Behind them, twin shadows stretch longer than they should, and the truth, like the Force itself, remains unspoken, waiting to fall like dice still turning in the desert breeze. As the Boon to Eve Classic ends, destinies are set in motion. Revan Skywalker, once a desert scavenger, faces the ultimate sacrifice, trading his most loyal creation, HK, to free his younger brother, Anakin. However, the dice of fate don't roll as expected, as Jedi interference alters the course, leaving Revan with a new realization about his place in the galaxy. Padme, still undercover, feels an unexpected bond with Revan, whose dreams of masked ghosts and voices in the Force continue to haunt him. Through telepathic exchanges, their connection deepens, even as the Jedi Council's looming presence casts shadows over them. Anakin, caught between hope and sorrow, races toward an uncertain future, while Revan begins to understand that his existence might not be his own choice, but a piece in a grander design. The mystery of who truly carries the Force's prophecy grows as Revan and Anakin's bond is tested, and Qui-Gon Jinn questions the truth of their destiny. The story is a quiet reflection on fate, sacrifice, and the delicate balance between will and destiny. Revan's anger flared as he snapped at the Jedi, his eyes cold with bitterness. "You made your choice. Now I have to deal with the consequences," he said. His voice carried the weight of unspoken pain. "If there had been another way, if I could have found a way to save our mother, that was never my intention, to hurt either of you," the Jedi Master responded, regret lining his words. Revan shot back with a sharp retort, his gaze unwavering. "There was another way. If you hadn't intervened, both my mother and brother would have been free, he exclaimed. "Do you have any idea what that would mean to someone like my mother? Someone who's been bound for so long?" His question hung in the air, heavy with unvoiced truths, as he stared into the eyes of the man who had altered his fate forever. For the first time in over 30 years, Revan Skywalker faces a future full of uncertainty, no longer worrying about his next meal or water, but about the truth of his own existence. As Qui-Gon Jinn presses him, the question looms. Would his mother and brother have left Tatooine without him? Revan insists he could have convinced them, but the Jedi's probing strikes at something deeper. Was it with words or the Force that he would have persuaded them? A confrontation of destiny, sacrifice, and the weight of choices. Revan is left to confront not only the questions of his life, but also the influence the Force holds over his very being. As their paths diverge, Qui-Gon's shadowed wisdom leaves Revan with an unsettling answer. Is he a player in the prophecy, or has he been placed in a role all along? Revan's voice came sharp, carrying the weight of frustration rather than inquiry, his words striking like a challenge. Not everything involves the Force, Qui-Gon, he snapped, his anger unmistakable. I would have just reminded her that her duty was to Anakin, not to me. It would have taken some time, but eventually she would have seen reason. His gaze was intense, a silent storm brewing beneath it. Their heated exchange had drawn no attention from the rest of the group until Shmi, overhearing their tension, made her way over. She couldn't catch every word, but the fury in Revan's tone and the coldness in his eyes told her enough. Is everything all right? She asked, her concern palpable. Revan turned to face her, his anger still simmering beneath the surface. No, he replied quietly, the tension lingering in his voice. Revan stood there, a heavy weight hanging in the air, knowing there was nothing he could change. Not now, anyway, he muttered, sending one last look toward the Jedi Master. His mother, Shmi, pressed him for answers, concern in her eyes. About what? She asked, trying to understand the tension between her son and the Jedi. Revan's gaze shifted to the Jedi, and in that fleeting moment, the guilt on his face was unmistakable. It was clear that whatever had happened involved her in some way, though she didn't know how. Her suspicions stirred. Perhaps it had something to do with the race. It doesn't matter, Mum, Revan said quietly, almost like a whisper. I'll see you at home. Before either Qui-Gon or Shmi could speak, Revan turned and walked away, leaving them behind in a silence, thick with unresolved questions. The air was thick with tension as Qui-Gon stood before Shmi, knowing the gravity of the moment. Would you like to tell me what has gotten into my son? Shmi's voice cut through the stillness. It wasn't a question, it was a demand. Qui-Gon hesitated, his mind racing. He had hoped for more time before revealing the truth of the bet he had made. Before the race, both Revan and I made separate wagers with Watto. Qui-Gon began, his voice heavy with the weight of the confession. Revan offered his droid to secure Annie's freedom, and I used Annie's pod as the wager. It was against either you or Revan. Shmi's eyes widened as the truth sunk in. Wait, so Annie's free? Revan stood in the distance, watching his brother Anakin celebrate, his joy untainted by the deep sadness that gripped Revan's heart. His gaze shifted to Padme, the handmaiden who had been quietly holding a conversation with his brother. As Revan walked over, he shared a brief, awkward smile with her, before Anakin, ever the eager one, approached him with a question about the conversation he just had with Qui-Gon. What did he want? Anakin asked, his excitement barely contained. Was it about freeing you and Mum too? Revan hesitated, his mind clouded by the painful truth. Not exactly, he replied, trying to keep his tone light. How could he tell Anakin that while they had gained their freedom, their mother remained bound? As they prepared to leave, Revan and Anakin exchanged words filled with a mix of emotions. Anakin, full of excitement, asks, while we're packing our stuff? Revan, his older brother, answers with a forced smile, confirming their plans. But even as they stand there, a deeper tension lingers in the air. Padme's voice, soft and gentle, reaches Revan through their shared bond in the Force, asking if he's okay. Revan, his mind already far from the present, replies with a simple no, the weight of his inner conflict pressing down on him. The bond they share is more than just telepathy. It's a quiet, unspoken understanding between them, as their destinies intertwine in ways neither can fully comprehend. He told her he should be happy after all. For the first time in their lives, neither he nor Anakin were bound anymore. But she finished the thought for him, her voice soft. But your mother island, he answered with a quiet pop of a syllable, trying to smile, though his eyes betrayed the truth. There was nothing he could do, no credits, no leverage, not while the devices in their bodies still tethered them to control. He turned to Anakin with a steady voice, telling him he'd meet him at home, and without waiting for a reply, walked past. Just before stepping into the blinding sun of Mos Espa, he gave her a small, fleeting smile, then vanished into the streets. The Gungan watched the black-haired boy disappear into the heat and muttered, "He doesn't look happy." But the younger Skywalker spun around, disbelief painted on his face. "What? No way Revan could be upset today. We're finally free. No more Watto, no more racing for scraps, no more shadows." Yet, as the desert winds rose, they told a different story. Far ahead, Revan walked alone, his figure shrinking against the horizon. Qui-Gon rode in silence, guiding his EOP through the shimmering haze while R2 beeped ahead, trying to cheer up the moment. But even twin suns couldn't lift the weight that hung over the group Freedom had come. Yes, but not without a cost. And for some, the desert never lets go. As they neared the ship, Qui-Gon spotted his Padawan Obi-Wan, who appeared from the ramp with an intense look on his face. "I was starting to get worried, Master," he said with a slight smile. "Placing our fates in the hands of slaves." Qui-Gon corrected him with a pointed look. "Anakin and Revan, Obi-Wan. Please do not refer to sentient beings as merely objects." As he dismounted, he helped Padme down. Obi-Wan bowed his head in apology, understanding the weight of his master's words. The bond that went beyond blood, yet still deeply rooted in his teaching. In the scorching heat of the desert, Revan faces a bittersweet decision. To secure his brother's freedom, he sacrifices his loyal companion HK, masking his heartbreak with a forced smile. As Revan contemplates his next move, Qui-Gon gives a cryptic order. "Start installing the hyperdrive. I have unfinished business." With an air of mystery, Revan's protege questions the vagueness of it all. "Business?" he asks, brow raised. Revan's response is calm yet firm. "I shouldn't be long." What's left unsaid lingers between them, the weight of destiny pressing down, as Revan walks toward a path that will change everything. Obi-Wan studied the scene before him, sighing deeply. "Another stray," he murmured under his breath as his gaze fell on the Gungan, its large webbed foot hopelessly trapped in a strap. Qui-Gon, however, wasn't concerned with the Gungan's predicament. He turned to his young pupil, dragging him away from the rest of the group, missing the curious look Padme shot their way. "They're the ones who got us the parts." Qui-Gon whispered, barely audible. Obi-Wan raised an eyebrow, his arms crossed over his chest. "You've got the parts. What else do you need from them?" he asked, his voice dripping with suspicion. The moment the ship lifts off the desert planet, Revan feels an unsettling sense of relief, though it's clouded by uncertainty. As he speaks to his Padawan, Qui-Gon's words carry a deeper weight. "It was the will of the Force that led us here." The Jedi Master reflects on a disturbance he sensed for years, a feeling that has only now crystallized, and it all revolves around two young boys. Revan's attempt to rationalize their presence is met with the Padawan's skepticism. "It was a damaged hyperdrive," he corrects. But Qui-Gon's words linger in the air. What is it about these boys that makes them so significant? The answer is far from simple. The Force itself seems to have intricately woven their fates together, though the question of why remains as elusive as ever. Qui-Gon Jinn's voice was steady, but his words carried the weight of destiny as he revealed the truth to Obi-Wan. "The blood samples I sent you last night, they belong to them." He paused, considering the enormity of what he was about to share. Both have a midi-chlorian count of 20,000. The older one has already begun to harness the Force on his own. He trailed off, his mind swirling with the implications. Revan Skywalker, at 14, carries the weight of a destiny he doesn't fully understand. A destiny shaped by the Force itself. His bond with his younger brother Anakin is deep, but fate is cruel. In a desperate bid to free Anakin from slavery, Revan sacrifices his most loyal companion, HK, only to watch his hope for his mother's freedom slip away, altered by Qui-Gon's unexpected interference. The dice that were meant to decide the brothers' futures now spin with a force of their own. As the tension between Revan and Qui-Gon grows, Padme becomes a quiet presence, silently linked to Revan through the Force, sensing his struggle, yet unsure of her own heart. Meanwhile, the Jedi must confront the truth. Are these brothers mere pawns, or is one of them truly the chosen one? With betrayal, sacrifice, and an unspoken vow to return for the one left behind, the storm of destiny builds, threatening to sweep them all into a future no one can control. In a tense conversation between the Jedi, Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi discuss the plight of those bound by slavery. Qui-Gon speaks of the difference between a soldier who chooses and a slave who obeys, emphasizing that both deserve better than being someone else's property. Obi-Wan, raising concerns, points out that even young slaves, like the boys they are discussing, could harbor resentment that might eventually turn into hate. He reminds Qui-Gon of a painful past, referencing a situation with someone named Xanatos, hinting that such hatred can have dangerous consequences. The discussion highlights the complex moral dilemmas faced by those who are caught between the system they serve and their own sense of justice. Qui-Gon shot his Padawan a sharp, almost furious look, causing the young man to avert his gaze in shame and regret. "Did you ever stop to think that this is exactly why we need to get them to Coruscant?" he asked, his voice heavy with emotion. "I failed Xanatos, and because of that failure, people died. I will not fail these boys." "You didn't fail him, Master," Obi-Wan protested, his tone soft. "His father corrupted him." "Because I killed him! Qui!" Gon cut in, his stern expression softening into one of regret. A painful thought crossed his mind, one he couldn't shake. He wondered every day what could have been if he hadn't killed Creon. It had been an accident, but he still couldn't forgive himself. He never wanted to kill him, but sometimes the choices he made didn't leave him with another option. The Padawan insisted, "Xanatos fell because he was attached to his father." The response came without hesitation. An attachment that Creon exploited. That's why attachments are forbidden. No emotion, only peace. The young Jedi stood firm. "I know the Jedi code, Obi-Wan," but the Padawan wasn't backing down. "These boys have formed an attachment to their mother. How long until history repeats itself?" Qui-Gon, unwavering, spoke with certainty. "It won't, not with the right guidance." The words left little room for doubt. Qui-Gon Jinn had already given without expectation of reward a trait that truly defined a Jedi. However, there was still something that needed to be addressed with the eldest Revan. When Obi-Wan questioned the need for this, his master's response came out sharper than intended. "Because I made a bet." Obi-Wan, already used to his master's tendency to gamble, responded with a resigned, "Why am I not surprised?" Qui-Gon, a bit irritated by the interruption, continued, trying once more to explain. Contrary to Obi-Wan's belief, Qui-Gon wasn't a gambler in the traditional sense. As he once said, greed could be a powerful ally, yet this time, he found himself caught between his actions and the bond with his Padawan, trying to convey more than just a mere exchange. Qui-Gon made a fateful decision during the race when he influenced the dice roll, altering its course. The original bet was simple. If the youngest competitor won, the dice would determine which of the slaves would be freed. If it landed on red, their mother would be freed, and if it landed on blue, Revan would be the one to gain freedom. Qui-Gon, feeling the weight of the decision, ensured the dice landed on blue, but as Revan, using the Force, made it fall on red, Qui-Gon's guilt weighed heavily on him. The Jedi Master was torn, knowing that if it had been possible to free them all, he would have done so. However, the priority was clear. He needed to bring both Anakin and Revan to the Jedi Council. Especially Revan, as the answers they sought about their origins lay there, and both their destinies were intertwined with the Force. Revan Skywalker, a boy who was never meant to exist, stands at the crossroads of destiny and the unknown. In a desert filled with fateful choices, he sacrifices his loyal droid, HK, to secure his brother's freedom, masking the pain with a faint smile. Yet, even as Revan's bond with Padme deepens through a silent, spiritual connection, the Force calls to him with dark whispers, and Qui-Gon Jinn's subtle interference shakes his faith. As the shadows of prophecy loom large, Revan questions his place in a world that may have been designed for him, not by choice, but by something far more controlling. With every step, the line between fate and will blurs. His journey now intertwined with the fate of his brother, Anakin. Revan knows the true price of freedom and the cost of the choices they've made. Qui-Gon Jinn sat quietly, his brow furrowed as the Padawan recited the Jedi code with robotic precision. He knew the rules, the theory. Emotion led to the dark side, anger festered into hate, and hate led to suffering. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that Revan's anger was different. It wasn't born from hate. He wasn't lashing out against Qui-Gon or the Order. It was a deep sorrow, a pain that tied him to a past he couldn't escape. Qui-Gon sighed, weary of the endless debate. "Revan is angry, but he doesn't hate me," he said softly, his voice heavy with doubt. It was a complicated truth, one that his Padawan couldn't grasp. Not yet. Revan, after all, wasn't like other Force users. His struggle wasn't just against the dark side, it was against the very idea of being controlled. of being a puppet to some greater cosmic plan. As Qui-Gon glanced out into the distance, he couldn't help but wonder if Revan's future had been written for him long before he even arrived. Obi-Wan shot a sharp, steady glance at his stubborn master, then turned and shook his head, muttering about how the council would react. As he boarded the Nubian, he left Qui-Gon behind, a silent reminder of their fractured approach. Meanwhile, Anakin, still basking in the thrill of his victory, walked home with his mother, C-3PO, and Revan, feeling the strange weight of freedom settle over him for the first time. The word free even felt foreign, though it was his reality now, all thanks to his brother. How Revan had managed to secure this freedom remained a mystery, but Anakin knew it was only a matter of time before the truth would come to light. His thoughts drifted to Padme, the sadness of her departure hitting him harder than expected. He hadn't thought much about what would happen to her once he won, only focusing on helping her and Qui-Gon get the necessary generator. Yet, as she kissed his cheek and hugged him goodbye, it was the first time he truly considered her presence in his life. Her closeness left him stunned, a feeling that lingered longer than he'd anticipated. He stood frozen, as though time itself had stopped. The moment felt like the greatest of his life, nothing, not even winning the race, compared. He watched her ride away, the wind pulling her further from him, her duty pulling her back to Naboo. The thought of never seeing her again weighed on him, heavy and relentless. She was leaving Tatooine, and he had made sure of it by securing the parts she needed. The weight of their separation crushed him more than he realized, and as she left, he understood that their paths were parting. He was free, but they were not meant to be together. She would return to her queen, and he, along with his brother and mother, would need to find a new place. And with Naboo under siege, it could never be there. The farewell felt bitter, despite knowing they had only shared a single day. But she had been an angel in his eyes, and now she was gone. His thoughts were broken when a Rodian far larger than him blocked his way, shouting accusations that drew a crowd. "You cheated!" The Rodian screamed, pulling the attention of both children and adults alike. Anakin, filled with rage, charged at his accuser. The word slave echoed in his mind like a wound that refused to heal. Before the Rodian could react, Anakin brought him down, fists flying with a fury born of years of torment. In that moment, nothing else mattered. The race, his family, his hopes for the future, only that word, that label that had chained him for so long. He'd been bound, but now he was free. The anger, sharp and hot, surged through him as he pounded the ground beneath him, determined that this would be the last time anyone would dare to call him that. It was a violent outburst, but one that marked his unshackling from the past. In the distance, Qui-Gon Jinn returned to witness the chaos, his face unreadable as he observed the aftermath of a moment where destiny collided with fury. The Jedi Master swiftly made his way through the crowd, separating the two boys locked in a fierce confrontation. With a stern voice, he demanded to know what had caused the fight. Anakin, embarrassed but still seething with anger, explained. Qui-Gon studied him closely, his disappointment evident in his gaze. Turning to the Rodian, whose injuries were minor but whose resentment toward Anakin was palpable, he asked, "Do you still think he cheated?" The Rodian sneered, his large eyes filled with contempt as he retorted, "Of course! Slaves can't win! They have no rights!" Pwai! Gon's grip tightened on Anakin's shoulder, sensing the boy's rising anger through the Force. Without saying a word, he led Anakin away from the crowd, their steps silent as they sought refuge from prying eyes. Qui-Gon, voice low and rough with reflection, reminds the boy that fighting changes nothing, and that other people's views must simply be endured. His hand firm yet gentle on Anakin's shoulder as they walk through dusty streets toward the small dwelling the Skywalkers call home. As they near it, he slips a leather pouch heavy with credits from beneath his cloak and hands it to Anakin, explaining he sold the pod to a stubborn Doug, and though his words sound practical, the gesture carries the quiet weight of choices made far from the arena's roar, leaving the boy comforted yet shadowed by the truth that freedom, even one, is never without cost. Anakin ran up the steps, clutching the bag tightly, his excitement surging as he burst through the door. Qui-Gon followed him, silent but present. "Mom, Revan!" the boy called, his voice filled with joy. His mother appeared, and Revan stepped out from behind her. "Guess what? Qui-Gon sold the pod! Look at all the money we have!" Anakin exclaimed, practically dropping the pouch into his mother's hands. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she stared down at the bulging pouch, a soft breath escaping her lips. She was stunned, overwhelmed by the unexpected turn of events. Revan's world was turned upside down as Qui-Gon entered the room, offering him the news of freedom. But the smile that should have followed didn't come. Instead, Revan stood silently, his face empty, while Qui-Gon spoke of the sacrifice that freed his younger brother Anakin, making the choice that forever altered the course of their destinies. Shmi, his mother, was still bound by fate's cruel hands, and Revan's heart weighed heavy with the price of freedom. "Thank you, Qui-Gon." Shmi spoke, her voice shaky, as the reality of their new lives sank in. Revan, though free from his bonds, couldn't bring himself to rejoice. The dice that had once offered hope now lay dormant in his mind, leaving him to question the very nature of his existence. Was he freed, or had he simply been placed in the game of destiny, manipulated by forces beyond his control? And as he glanced over at his brother, whose joy radiated in stark contrast to his own, Revan's path forward became ever more uncertain, shattered by the echoes of a past that refused to stay buried. Anakin's grin broke across his face like sunlight. "We're finally all free! We can all finally leave here for good!" But the moment shattered when the Jedi's voice cut through, quiet and heavy. "I'm sorry, Anakin," he said after a glance passed between him and Shmi. "I couldn't free your mother." The boy froze, his joy evaporating. "What?" he stammered, the surge of adrenaline from his freedom. The race, the kiss, gone in an instant. "But the money," he murmured. Revan, standing still, eyes steady, finally broke his silence since the track. "It's not enough, is it?" Revan Skywalker, torn by his struggle, faced an impossible choice, sacrificing his most trusted companion, HK, to secure his younger brother's freedom, yet still unable to free his mother. The harsh reality of Tatooine was clear. Slaves were a symbol of status, and no amount of money could sway the unforgiving system. Revan, desperate, suggested to trade his life for his mother's, but before the Jedi could respond, Shmi's voice interrupted, claiming her worth as a bonded servant was higher than his. She quietly urged her son to let go, her place now bound to this world. Her future was here, and it was time for Revan to accept that the ties between them would forever be severed. Revan couldn't bring himself to leave his mother behind. "I can't go with you." But his mother, with a smile that held both warmth and sorrow, met his gaze, her brown eyes locking with his storm gray ones. "I'll survive, Revan," she assured him. "I was a slave long before either you or Annie were in my life." Revan's frustration boiled over. "Exactly. If anyone deserves freedom, it's you." He wasn't going to let the people who had bound her determine her fate. Yet, despite his protest, she stayed resolute, understanding the cost of his fight for her freedom. It was a battle she had already faced long before their paths had even crossed. She told him with calm finality that she had long accepted the life fate handed her, that the chains she bore were lighter than the burden he now carried. Her voice didn't tremble, only her eyes did. She asked him to go, not for glory or destiny, but for her and for the boy they both protected. But Revan, jaw tight and fists clenched until pale, couldn't look at her. He had always been the shield without a father, without a choice. Now the Force demanded he abandon the one who had never abandoned him. "I can't leave you here, Mom," he said, barely a whisper. "I just can't." In the quiet moments before a new chapter, Revan's heart beat heavily in his chest as his mother gently placed her hands over his, giving him a soft but firm squeeze. She looked at him with a loving smile, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. "Yes, you can. You have to." Her gaze shifted to Anakin, who stood next to the Jedi, his small form already filled with uncertainty. "Ani, come here." At the call of his name, Anakin hurried over, his face a mix of hope and confusion. Taking a deep breath, Shmi smiled once more, her eyes moving between her two sons. "You both need to promise me. Promise that you'll always be there for each other, through thick and thin." The weight of her words settled in the air like a heavy silence, one that would follow them both through the trials to come. Revan gazed at his brother, the weight of the moment settling in. His words trembled as he spoke. "I promise, Mum." He fought to hold back the tears, threatening to fall, desperately trying to be strong, just as his brother was. "Promise me, Revan." The promise was made, and finally, Revan looked to their mother, offering her a soft smile. "I promise," he whispered, and in that small acknowledgement, Shmi smiled back, her heart full. "Good," she said, her voice steady. No matter how far apart we are, we will always be family. Never forget that." Her words hung in the air as Revan felt a deep pang in his chest. "I'm going to miss you so much, Mom," Anakin whispered, his voice a mix of pain and hope. The sun set over the horizon, but the shadows of fate had already begun to move. Anakin whispered softly, and Shmi smiled as she lovingly kissed his forehead. "I love you too, Ani," she said, releasing the young boy's hands and then kneeling down to do the same to Revan. She pulled him into a tight embrace before whispering, "And I love you too, Revan." Her voice trembled slightly as she fought back tears. With a final embrace, she sent them both off to pack, watching as they rushed to their room, leaving her and Qui-Gon behind. Qui-Gon cleared his throat, a lump in his throat from the heartwarming moment he had just witnessed. "I'm sorry," he spoke quietly, still affected by the family's bond. "As I said earlier, if I could have freed all of you, I would have." Shmi shook her head, a reassuring smile on her face. "You have nothing to apologize for, Master Jedi," she said, understanding the limitations of his power, but also the strength of his intentions. Shmi dismissed the apology with a wave and walked toward the tall man. "Because of you, my children are free. I will always be in your debt," she said with a smile, her voice full of gratitude. "Will you be taking them to the Jedi?" "Yes," Qui-Gon replied, his tone calm and resolute. "Both of them are strong with the Force. I hope to uncover the reasons behind Revan's dreams." "They're just dreams, aren't they?" she asked, unsure. Qui-Gon paused before answering, his gaze distant. "I wish I could say that. But his dreams feel more like visions than mere dreams. Revan, once a desert scavenger, faces a painful sacrifice when he exchanges his loyal creation, HK, for his brother Anakin's freedom. But fate isn't easily manipulated. A subtle intervention by a Jedi shifts the odds, choosing Revan's release over his mother's freedom. Meanwhile, Padme, still undercover, finds herself forming an unexpected bond with Revan, who is haunted by visions of masked ghosts and whispers in the Force. As their telepathic connection deepens, the mystery surrounding Revan's origins intensifies. Qui-Gon Jinn, grappling with his own doubts, realizes the true nature of the prophecy, Anakin or Revan, each bearing the weight of a destiny no one fully understands. But Revan is left to question. Was he created by the Force or something darker? His journey, fraught with sacrifices and uncertain futures, is only just beginning. Revan's sacrifice had already started shaping his destiny, but the truth of it weighed heavily on his heart. He had just freed his brother Anakin, trading his most trusted ally, HK, for the boy's future. The Jedi, however, didn't make it easy, with Qui-Gon's subtle intervention shifting fate in a way that left Revan questioning everything. When the mother of the boys asked about their future, the looming uncertainty hung in the air. If they succeed, it will still be a hard life, Qui-Gon told her, though he promised to care for them. But what if they failed? The mother's voice, tinged with hope and fear, revealed the depth of her longing to shield her children from a life of pain. She wished for them to never return to the harsh world they came from, hoping they would forget the desolate sands of Tatooine. Her dream was simple, to see them happy, even if it meant never seeing them again. As the sun rose over Tatooine, Revan Skywalker stood at the edge of his destiny, caught in the throes of a painful sacrifice. To secure Anakin's freedom, he gave up his most loyal companion, HK, and in doing so, sealed his own fate. But fate is a fickle thing, and a Jedi's subtle manipulation of the dice disrupted Revan's plan, leaving him with questions that dug deeper into his soul. While Anakin felt the warmth of freedom, his joy was overshadowed by the grief of leaving behind his mother. Revan, struggling with growing visions and an inexplicable connection to Padme, found himself questioning his very existence. Were he and Anakin truly born of chance? Or were they pieces in a larger design manipulated by the Force itself? The shadows of a mysterious warrior and the weight of the prophecy grew heavier with each step, as Qui-Gon wrestled with the true nature of their destinies. With no answers, only whispers in the wind, Revan made a silent vow he would return for the one left behind, even as his own path twisted into the unknown. Anakin's tears fell freely as he clung to his mother, refusing to let go. "I don't want to leave you," he cried, his voice trembling as Revan approached. "You'll be alone." Shmi, with a gentle touch, cupped his cheek, kneeling to meet his gaze. "Remember when you were only 5, climbing that dune to scare the banthas away so they wouldn't be harmed? You collapsed several times thinking you couldn't do it, but you did. Now, Ani, this is one of those moments you have to do what you think you can't." Anakin nodded quietly, his heart heavy, while Shmi's gaze lingered, filled with a mother's unspoken strength. Anakin struggled to hold back his tears, feeling overwhelmed by the weight of what was happening. His mother's words, though filled with strength, seemed to push him further into despair. He couldn't help but feel that he wasn't strong enough for this, but despite his doubt, he understood that they had to part ways, even though neither of them was ready for it. "Will I ever see you again?" he asked, his voice trembling with the fear that this might be their final goodbye. "What does your heart tell you?" came the quiet reply, as his mother gazed at him with a comforting yet solemn look. Anakin swallowed hard, his lips trembling as he whispered, "I don't know. Maybe." His mother nodded, her gaze steady and full of unspoken truth. "Then we will see each other again." With a gentle, reassuring smile, she comforted him, the soft words halting the flow of tears. "Be brave, my little warrior," she whispered, reminding him of the true meaning of his name. After one last embrace with Anakin, she stood and made her way to Revan, who pulled her into a tight hug. It was then that she realized just how much her firstborn had grown. He was on the cusp of manhood. "I will become a Jedi." Revan spoke with quiet determination, his voice faltering as he held her, knowing this parting would be long. "I'll return, and I'll free you. I'll free Tatooine. I promise. No matter where you are, no matter who you become, my love will follow you," she said softly. "Now be brave and take care of your brother." Revan stood by his mother for one final moment, whispering a heartfelt goodbye. As they parted ways, his heart ached, yet duty pulled him away. Qui-Gon, ever the Jedi, led Revan and Anakin to Watto's shop, where the tension in the air was thick, the Toydarian still grumbling about losing his workforce. In a strange twist, Watto kept his word, deactivating the bombs inside the boys, though surgery awaited them later. Revan's trusted companion, HK, was granted permission to stay with Shmi when the shop was closed, offering her protection during the long, lonely nights. With everything settled, Qui-Gon led the brothers away from Tatooine's scorched plains, scanning the horizon both with his eyes and through the Force. The desert stretched endlessly before them, but a much larger destiny awaited them beyond. Every instinct screamed at him to stay vigilant. His former master's words echoed in his mind, "Always prepare for the worst when stepping outside your comfort zone." As the silver ship came into view, the sandstorms had cleared, and their path was now clear. The blonde-haired boy whined behind him, asking how much longer the journey would take. Qui-Gon, about to respond, froze. A cloaked figure sped toward them on a speeder. "Boys, get down!" Qui-Gon shouted as he used the Force to summon his lightsaber. It ignited with a bright green glow as he quickly pushed the boy to the ground. Looking over his shoulder, Revan saw the speeder screech to a halt as a mysterious figure in a black hooded cloak dismounted, leaping unnaturally high into the air. The figure drew a lightsaber from the Force, one with a hilt twice as large as Qui-Gon's, a double-bladed crimson weapon. The attackers swung down fiercely, their hood falling away to reveal their face. The battle rages as dark, jagged markings streak across the demonic face of a formidable foe, whose predatory eyes gleam beneath horns that crown its head. Its howls slice through the air like a hunter on the chase. As the clash of blades rings out, two warriors struggle for control, weapons locked in a relentless struggle. "Revan! Anakin! To the ship!" the Jedi Master commands, his voice steady as he forces the creature back with a swift thrust of his blade, his elbow delivering a strike to its jaw. But the beast remains undeterred, closing in once more, a relentless force. Despite his every effort, Qui-Gon cannot find an opening. Each attack he makes is swiftly countered. "Tell them to take off! Go! Go!" he urges, his determination pushing him onward. With renewed resolve, he ducks under a red blade and using the Force sends the creature flying. Yet, it returns faster, more vicious than before, forcing him to fight harder than ever to survive. Revan and his brother rushed up the ramp of the ship, only to encounter Padme and a mysterious man dressed in an unfamiliar uniform. Upon seeing them, Padme's handmaiden's eyes widened in alarm. Anakin immediately blurted out, "Qui-Gon's in trouble! Some guy attacked us with a lightsaber! He told us to tell you to take off!" Before Revan could speak, he added, "We're just here to warn you." Revan, however, addressed Padme, not the stranger. "Who are you?" the man demanded, his gaze intense and suspicious. "How do I know this isn't some trick to get me to leave the ship unguarded?" Revan, breathless from both the run and the sweltering heat, turned to the dark-haired boy. Don't believe it? Then look outside! He snapped, urgency in his voice. Unless we get the hell out of here, we're dead. Padme quickly stepped in, grabbing Revan by the arm and pulling him toward the front of the ship. It's okay, Captain, she reassured him as they moved. They're friends. As they reached the cockpit, Revan spotted the pilot, an older man with a pilot's insignia, and a young man who appeared to be in his early 20s, working the control panel. The younger one had short brown hair with a single braid and wore white robes. Revan, ever the perceptive one, guessed the young man was likely a Jedi specifically, a Padawan. Padme grips Revan's arm, urgency flickering in her gaze as she breathes out the warning that Qui-Gon is in danger. Revan's voice finishes the plea to leave just as Anakin rushes to stand beside him, both boys tense under desert heat and tightening fate. The Jedi springs up, robes catching the light, eyes narrowing at Revan with a question he barely lets hang before striding to the viewport. Silence coils around them, broken only by the pilot's uneasy glance over his shoulder and the flat denial of danger he can't see. Yet the Jedi's stare sharpens, scanning the horizon until the unmistakable shimmer of green and red ignites at the port's edge, a silent answer waiting in the sun-bleached dust. The Jedi barked orders. Get us into the air, and over there now, fly low! Rushing to the back of the ship, he made sure his companions were secured before finding his own seat. As the ship lifted effortlessly from the desert, the battle between Qui-Gon Jinn and a mysterious figure unfolded. Qui-Gon's every move was a blur as sand swirled around him, his lightsaber clashing with the red of his opponent's. As the ship powered up, Qui-Gon reached out with the Force, sending a powerful push that unbalanced the creature. With a swift leap, he landed on the ship's ramp, barely managing to climb aboard. As the ramp closed, he collapsed to the floor, panting heavily. Obi-Wan appeared, concern etched across his face, witnessing the aftermath of a battle far from over. Revan stood, breathing heavily, his hand raised as the familiar figures of Anakin, and Revan knelt beside him. He gave Anakin a reassuring gesture, a silent promise of safety. Anakin and Revan Skywalker, he said, motioning between the two boys. Meet my Padawan, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Anakin's eyes sparkled with excitement, clearly awestruck. Are you a Jedi too? He asked, unable to hide his admiration. You must be really powerful if Master Qui-Gon is your master. Obi-Wan hesitated, caught off guard by the question, but before he could answer, Anakin bombarded him with more curiosity. Have you been a Jedi long? Do you like pod racing? Revan Skywalker stands at the crossroads of fate, where his sacrifice for his brother's freedom only deepens his own inner turmoil. Having traded his loyal droid for Anakin's release, Revan soon finds himself caught in a web of prophetic destiny, where the Force seems to have shaped his very existence. Despite the freedom Anakin gains, the brothers' bond grows heavier with each passing day, as the weight of their past and the truths they are yet to understand weigh on them. Padme, still undercover, grows closer to Revan, her connection with him becoming more than just a quiet alliance. As whispers of the Force echo in Revan's mind, Qui-Gon Jinn's doubt about which Skywalker truly carries the weight of the prophecy only intensifies. Meanwhile, a shadowy warrior with a double-bladed saber begins to stalk them, bringing with it the realization that even the Jedi's grasp on fate is not as secure as they would like to believe. What will the future hold for Revan and Anakin? Only time will reveal who is truly meant to bring balance to the Force. The young knight's return wasn't met with cheers, it was shadowed by judgment. From the start, the older apprentice resented how deeply his master cared for the mysterious child they had just rescued. The Jedi's concern for a former slave, one who stirred prophecy and defied order, unsettled bonds forged by years of training. The council's hesitation echoed in silence, but the master's bold declaration that his apprentice was ready for the trials wasn't about promotion, it was about defiance. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, fans debated whether the warrior from another age should clash with the Sith apprentice. But throwing a child into the fire untrained, unready, was not the story's path. The echoes of legacy had to wait. In this candid exchange between passionate fans, one expressed gratitude for a thoughtful review, promising to stay true to the Revan character. Another joked in surprise, while someone admitted they hadn't yet planned how the Clone Wars arcs would tie in, especially the Mortis arc, which wasn't even on their radar. Instead, they were pondering whether Galen Marek should be born before the Clone Wars and eventually become Revan's Padawan in this alternate timeline. A different voice found it fitting that Revan's iconic mask once belonged to a Mandalorian woman he vowed to avenge after seeing her death in a vision. Another contributor remained undecided about the fate of a certain Jedi Master, noting that his survival would alter Obi-Wan's path entirely. Finally, a brief confusion over a timeline hint wrapped the thread in typical fan speculation fashion. Malak shot back with a sharp retort, his eyes narrowing as he recalled the past with bitterness. I was the only one with enough sense to change my name and appearance to stop them from finding us. But Revan, ever the skeptic, wasn't having it. You changed your name from Alec to Malik? Anyone with half a brain could see you were still the same person. The names are practically identical. Malik smirked, the flames of old resentment flickering in his gaze. Better than what you did, he countered, his voice thick with disdain. Revan, how original. Revan bristled at the mention of the name, defending himself. The Republic media gave me that name. I had nothing to do with it. Malak's laughter was bitter, echoing with the weight of a past long gone, yet never forgotten. Oh, after the revanchists, a movement I helped form. Their argument crackled with the tension of old friendships turned to ash, revealing how ambition had twisted them both, leaving nothing but echoes of a dark legacy. In the depths of war, Revan stands at the crossroads of destiny, haunted by dreams of a dark path. A former hero, now burdened with the weight of choices he cannot escape. He faces an enemy more dangerous than ever before, his former best friend, now twisted into the Sith, Lord Malik. As visions of the Starforge in their shared past flood his mind, Revan realizes the galaxy is on the brink of collapse and the line between friend and foe has blurred. The Jedi, always hesitant and divided, remain absent from the fight, leaving Revan to question his path. The ghosts of their past of victories won and lives lost loom over him, challenging him to decide if he's still a Jedi or if the darkness calls him back. Each step brings him closer to an inevitable confrontation, and as Revan faces his past sins, only one truth remains. This battle will define the galaxy's future and his place within it. Is this conversation helpful so far? Darth Malik, his voice a cold, mechanical growl, watches as his forces clash with Republic fighters. His gaze is unwavering, a fierce testament to the war raging outside. You left me no choice, Alec, he murmurs, the weight of old grievances settling in. Alec, it's been a long time, Malik reflects, the name stirring distant memories. His thoughts drift as he continues. You stopped using it. With a rumble, Malik turns toward his former mentor, his face hardened by betrayal. A bounty on my head. He spits, recalling the corrupt Jedi Council that sought to quell their power, fearing the change they both embraced. And if I remember, we all did, Captain Malik. The past looms, thick with regret and the shadows of lost comrades, as the two former allies face the darkness they once shared. Revan's mind is tormented by dreams, visions of the past that drag him back to his former self. Malik, his old friend Alec, turned enemy. The two share a bitter exchange, each recalling their fall into darkness and the twisted paths that led them to the Starforge. Malik, filled with rage, mocks Revan for his choice of the name. Revan, claiming it's hardly original, a name from a movement they once built together. Revan, however, fires back, stating that he had no control over the name it was thrust upon him by the Republic media. Yet, deep in his heart, the conflict remains. Is he still the Jedi he once was, or has he fully embraced the Sith he was meant to be? As their old wounds reopen, the weight of their past actions looms heavy, threatening to drag them both back into the abyss they once escaped. He sneered, voice dripping with scorn. Still jealous, even now? The shadow of his resentment loomed large. He had lived a lifetime eclipsed, always second to the legend, always just a footnote in the saga of a galaxy's favorite hero. No mission, no sacrifice, no life saved could ever be enough, not when the flawless revanchist walked among them like a god. Is that what this is? The voice across the void challenged, raw with disbelief. You'd annihilate billions for petty jealousy? His accusation hung like a blade, but the reply was colder than steel. I know, came the reply, followed by a laugh synthetic, hollow, cruel echoing in the dark chamber like a death knell. Revan stands there, torn between his past and present. In the depths of his dreams, he confronts Malik, his former friend Alec, now consumed by rage. Malak mocks him, revealing the brutal truth of their past, how Revan's decisions led to the terrible scars that marked him forever. His jawplate, a haunting reminder of the pain he endured, is a cruel symbol of their shared ambition. With every word, Malak's fury rises, his once yellow eyes now burning crimson, and as he glances at Revan, silence becomes their battle. The weight of their past looms over them both, as Revan struggles to reconcile with the man he once was and the man he's becoming. The tension is palpable, as the force of their memories, guilt, and hatred collides. In the midst of a dark, surreal dreamscape, Revan faces his former ally Malak on the ominous Starfort. Malak, bitter and filled with rage, confronts Revan for leading them into the unknown regions, with the belief they could defeat the ancient Sith Emperor, Vitiate. The accusation stings. It was you who brought us here. It was your arrogance that doomed us. Revan, however, struggles to recall the specifics of this past, the weight of forgotten memories pressing down on him. Malak, bitter and consumed by the past, recalls everything with chilling clarity. In the tension-filled exchange, Revan learns that the powerful force behind their fall was Vitiate, the very one who had controlled the Mandalorians. As the dark secrets of their history resurface, Revan is forced to confront the haunting truth of their shared past and his uncertain future. The Dark Lord casually remarked, "I'm impressed with how much you remember from your past life. What else comes to mind?" With a solemn look, Revan replied, "Everything until we left for the unknown regions." Malak, his voice tinged with bitterness, continued, "Consider yourself fortunate. You don't recall how swiftly we were overwhelmed. Once hailed as the greatest Jedi of our time, we were beaten like novices on their first day. We tried to infiltrate the capital city of Droman Khas, believing we could eliminate Vitiate without anyone knowing. We thought we'd return as heroes to the Republic, but we never stood a chance." His words dripped with regret and frustration, his teeth nearly gritting in the process. In a dark, twisted chapter of their past, the Sith Lord recounts the horrors that began the fall of his once cherished friend. Malak's voice trembles with rage as he relives the moment when their minds were shattered, their wills broken. In an instant, they became slaves to the Emperor's will, turning to the dark side under a relentless assault on their minds. This torment continued as they were sent to scour the galaxy, hunting for secrets about the Republic's military strengths and weaknesses, only to return as soldiers in a war that would bring the galaxy to its knees. But when questioned about the need for the Starforge, the answer is clear: to create an unstoppable army. The Mandalorian War had already drained the Republic's forces, and now, with the Starforge, the Emperor could amass an endless supply of droids, ships, and war materials, an army that would guarantee his victory. After his victory, Revan realizes the true nature of the Starforge. It's not just a shipyard, but a living entity that feeds on the dark side within everyone. Malak. Once his friend feared the Forge's full power and held back, but Revan has no such hesitations. He's ready to unleash its potential. With a cold gesture, Malak shows the floating bodies in stasis pods, old allies and enemies trapped, their lives consumed by the Forge's hunger. Revan's past with Malak haunts him, but now, the true battle begins, as the darkness pulls him deeper. Revan Skywalker, aboard Queen Amidala's ship, is plagued by vivid Force dreams that drag him back to his past. He confronts his former apprentice, now Darth Malak, in the depths of the Starforge. These haunting visions reveal a time of galactic warfare, betrayal, and a forgotten legacy that binds Revan and Malak in a vicious cycle of darkness. As Revan struggles to understand his place in the galaxy, torn between the path of the Jedi and the lure of the Sith, his arrival on Coruscant only deepens his inner turmoil. The clash of ideals is palpable, with Anakin's hopeful spirit contrasting Revan's dread. Qui-Gon Jinn senses that these dreams are not just echoes of a dark past, they are a warning. The ghosts of the Starforge come alive, threatening to consume Revan's mind, while his uncertain future on Coruscant looms large. Revan, lost in the grip of his past, is thrust into a nightmare where his former friend, now an enemy, taunts him on the dark, steel-laden Starforge. Malak's words cut deep, bitterly accusing Revan of jealousy and failure, but Revan's resolve remains unshaken. The tension rises as Malak mocks him, claiming his achievements with the Forge surpass any of Revan's past. The two clash, their words sharp as their blades, while Malak's rage fuels the battle. Revan, however, is undeterred. He knows he must face his darkest fears, for even in the face of defeat, he can harness the power of the Jedi trapped within the Forge. The fight becomes more than a struggle for survival. It's a test of legacy, friendship twisted by ambition, and the cost of power. The stakes? Revan's soul itself. Is this conversation helpful so far? In a terrifying dreamscape, Revan faces his former ally turned enemy, Darth Malak, on the haunting Starforge. Malak, consumed by rage and thirst for power, reveals his twisted plans to use the Force to dominate the galaxy, feeding off the life essence of every Force-sensitive being. He speaks with cold conviction, claiming that once the Republic fades away, he will rebuild his empire and destroy the ancient Sith Emperor, Vitiate, taking the throne for himself. Revan, however, sees through the madness, declaring Malak has lost his mind. As the tension rises, Malak grows impatient, igniting his crimson lightsaber, and with a bitter hiss, he declares that Revan's time has come. But in a chilling final remark, Malak promises that Revan's friends will soon follow him into the abyss. Do you like this personality? In the depths of the Starforge, a series of powerful visions shakes Revan. Confronting his dark past, he revisits memories of his old friend Alec, now Darth Malak, and their rise to power, leading to the fall of their once shared ambitions. Revan is torn between his destiny as a Jedi or the rebirth of a Sith. Amid the chaos, a lightsaber duel erupts between these old allies, each driven by rage and betrayal, while Revan's connection to the Force pulls him further into a dark legacy. As Anakin remains hopeful about joining the Jedi, Revan struggles with his nightmares, haunted by the ghosts of his former life. The tension between light and dark builds as Revan must confront his past to secure his future. With a roar, Malak charged at Revan, vowing to end their history of betrayal once and for all. His fury was unleashed, and the very air trembled as his voice shattered metal and sent panels flying across the room. But Revan was ready. He gripped his lightsaber tighter and dropped into the defensive Soresu stance, the Force heightening his focus. In an instant, Malak crossed the distance, crimson blade flashing in the air, striking fiercely with Form V, D-Gem. So, the two sabers collided with a brilliant flash of white, blinding them both, and for a moment, the universe stood still. Revan! A voice called out softly, pulling the young man from his dream, his mind swirling between the echoes of past lives and the ghosts of old battles. With his tired gray eyes struggling to adjust, Revan blinked as the blinding light flooded his vision. It took a few moments before he could make out a blurry figure standing before him. As he focused, the figure slowly came into focus, revealing none other than Anakin. "Ani?" Revan rasped, his throat dry and uncomfortable. "What's going on?" he asked, pushing himself off the couch, his arm numb from a long night's sleep, wiping away the remnants of drool from his mouth. Glancing down, he noticed the thin orange sheet draped over him, a small comfort that he was both thankful for and annoyed by, though he made sure not to show it. "We're here!" Anakin's excited words cut through the fog of Revan's thoughts, and though Revan couldn't help but feel a bit irritated, there was also a strange sense of relief in hearing them. Is this conversation helpful so far? Revan woke up groggily, rubbing his eyes in confusion. "What?" he muttered, still half asleep. Anakin, full of energy and excitement, grinned widely. "We're almost at Coruscant," he announced, bouncing on his feet. "We'll be landing soon, come on." He grabbed Revan's arm, tugging him up eagerly. "Today's the day we become Jedi!" But Revan, still dazed and unsure, mumbled, "Jedi!" Anakin looked at him with surprise. "What? There's no plural!" As they neared their destination, a sense of unease lingered over Revan. His past, dark and haunted, stirred in his mind, making him question if his future lay with the Jedi or if the shadows of his past were pulling him back to a different path. Is this conversation helpful so far? Revan and Anakin share a moment aboard their ship, heading for Coruscant. Anakin, with his usual enthusiasm, teases his brother, trying to ensure no mistake is made about the Jedi, before laughing it off. "I was just testing you," he says, a mischievous grin on his face. Revan, a little slower to react, laughs quietly and stretches, the weariness of his journey evident. The contrast between Anakin's carefree energy and Revan's haunted demeanor is palpable, as if the weight of the past lingers over him. The playful exchange between the two masks, a deeper undercurrent Revan's struggle with his identity and the dark dreams that relentlessly pull at him. As they approach Coruscant, the tension between destiny and choice becomes clearer, leaving Revan to wonder whether he's truly a Jedi in the making or a Sith reborn. Revan sighed, running his fingers through his hair, pulling it back. "Let's not keep the others waiting," he muttered. With a joyful chirp, Anakin darted past him and headed for the far door. Smiling, Revan followed, stepping into the hallway. He had a hunch where their crew would be, Either the throne room, where the fake queen was debriefed about the events on Tatooine, or the cockpit. So, what do you think they'll be like? Anakin's voice cut through his thoughts as they reached the turbolift. Revan, still distracted, asked, "What will who be like?" As he pressed the button for the door, he glanced at his younger brother, both stepping into the sleek, cylinder-shaped lift. As the elevator doors slid shut, a sudden lurch shot them upwards faster than expected. "The Jedi Council!" The blonde-haired figure blurted out with a grin that threatened to split his face in two. "Who else could I be speaking about?" "Well, I don't know what's going on in that head of yours," came the teasing reply as a smirk curled onto the speaker's lips. "Usually, they're surprisingly little." "Shut up!" The first one barked, face flushed, as he shoved his companion with all his strength. "I can think!" Revan shot back with a smirk. "Sure, if it involves anything to do with pod racing," earning a dramatic pout from his younger brother. Anakin tried to play innocent, but Revan raised an eyebrow. "I can think of other things," he added, eyes narrowing. "Like a certain girl," he teased, watching Anakin's face ignite like Tatooine's twin sunsets. "A certain girl that just so happens to be on the ship? Padme is just a friend," Anakin snapped defensively. Revan grinned wider, voice dripping with mischief. "I never said Padme." And just like that, Anakin turned redder than a malfunctioning hyperdrive, exposed by his brother's sharp aim and sharper wit. "Didn't think you were into older girls." Revan let out a heavy sigh, adding, "I hope you didn't break her heart." Anakin recoiled, gagging in disgust. "Ew, don't be gross! Amy's one of my closest friends, and she's just a little kid." As the turbolift doors slid open, they stepped out onto the station near the hyperdrive. She didn't seem to mind, at least not according to what she told Mum. Revan casually shrugged. "Wait, what did you tell Mum?" Anakin asked, quickening his pace as he followed Revan, who was already heading towards the cockpit and throne room. Revan tossed the remark over his shoulder without much care. "What do you care?" But the jab landed sharp. His younger companion squirmed. "You're smitten with Padme." Immediate denial. "I'm not smitten with her." Revan's smirk didn't budge. "Sure you're not." "I'm not," came the flustered reply, louder this time, desperate. Revan barely needed to push. "Then why do you sigh dreamily whenever she's in the room?" "I don't do that," the boy protested, voice cracking under pressure. Revan raised an eyebrow. "And find any reason to hold her hand." There was a pause. "I did that one time." Revan's grin widened as he reached the top of the stairs, enjoying the rare opportunity to tease Anakin. "You know, it's only because you've had no other chance," he remarked, his eyes sparkling with mischief. Anakin's cheeks flushed, and Revan couldn't resist a playful jab. "You turned an interesting shade of red when Padme kissed your cheek right before the big race." Stammering, Anakin tried to explain, It was hot." Revan shot back grinning. "It's always hot on Tatooine." With a teasing tone, he added, "But I've never seen you go red like that before." As Revan and Anakin approach Coruscant, the bustling capital of the Galactic Republic, tension fills the air. The hum of the ship's engines fades as Rick Olier's voice echoes over the intercom, signaling their descent. The platform is within reach, and the cityscape looms ahead. Anakin, full of awe, rushes to the cockpit, gazing out at the seemingly endless forest of metal and glass. Coruscant, a planet transformed into one vast city, leaves him speechless. Rick casually comments on the beauty of the place, though he admits it wouldn't be his ideal home. For Revan, however, the grand skyline is merely a backdrop to the storm swirling in his mind. Haunted by dreams of his past, he questions his place in this galaxy, torn between light and darkness. As the ship descends into the heart of the city, Anakin's youthful excitement contrasts sharply with Revan's inner turmoil, setting the stage for an uncertain future. "Is this conversation helpful so far?" Revan scoffed. "I bet you'd lose your credits faster here than in the lower city of Terrace." Rick blinked, unsure. I guess. Only been once stayed in the middle city." Anakin's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "How would you know, Reverend? You've always lived on Tatooine." Revan waved it off, cool and vague. "It's just a figure of speech, Annie." But beneath the surface, something stirred those dreams. Those visions, they weren't just nightmares. If they were glimpses of what's to come, then Terrace wasn't far off. Revan couldn't shake the haunting dreams that had been gripping him, filled with vivid glimpses of his past, or perhaps a future yet to unfold. It was on Terrace that he, alongside Karth, would search for Bastila Shan, a Jedi who had escaped the doomed Endar Spire before its destruction at the hands of the Sith. But the deeper Revan delved into his visions, the more he wondered if the Force was warning him about something darker, a twisted future where he might become just as corrupted as his former friend, Alec, now known as Darth Malak. He remembered his own horrifying acts as Darth Revan, how he had torn apart lives and led the Republic into chaos. The weight of those memories crushed him, especially the thought of his mother, who had always taught him better. Yet, the more he reflected on the past, the more he feared that the darkness wasn't just behind him, it was within him. Revan Skywalker, haunted by vivid dreams of his past, faces a deep internal conflict aboard the Queen's ship. As he struggles with dark visions, he is torn between his legacy as a Jedi and the shadow of his fall to the Sith. Meanwhile, Anakin's unbridled optimism and fascination with Coruscant starkly contrast Revan's inner turmoil. Their arrival on the gleaming capital of the Republic only deepens Revan's doubt, as memories of betrayal and bloodshed on the Starforge continue to plague him. Padme watches with quiet concern, and Qui-Gon Jinn begins to suspect that Revan's troubling dreams are more than mere nightmares. They could be warnings of a darker fate. The tension grows as Revan contemplates his past, uncertain whether he is on the path of redemption or damnation. Revan walked down the ship's corridor, followed by Qui-Gon, who cast a sympathetic glance at the Gungan, though he hadn't known him long enough to say much. The Gungan seemed harmless. Clumsy even, but ultimately harmless. Passing by the Queen by the boarding ramp, Qui-Gon headed towards the throne room, thinking the Queen and her handmaidens weren't using it, and Captain Panaka would be watching her closely now that they had reached Coruscant. The perfect place for an assassin to strike. Stepping into the empty throne room, Qui-Gon addressed Revan gently. "Now that we're alone, want to talk about your dream?" Revan, looking down, spoke softly. "I dreamt of Malak." The words barely escaped his lips, but the weight of it hit him. Everything that had happened to his old friend Alec was because of the path they had taken. Qui-Gon, curious, responded, "I don't think you've mentioned this, Malak, before." Anakin looked away quickly, embarrassed that he'd even asked, his voice shrinking as he muttered something about sticking to the practical. Revan gave a casual shrug, wiping down his arms, then leaned in with a sly smirk just between them. He figured someone like Padme would probably admire a man with insight, not someone who thought rushing into battle could fix the galaxy. Anakin, trying to sound indifferent, stammered a weak reply, but the blush rising in his cheeks betrayed him. He tried to deflect, said he didn't think she looked like an angel. Revan raised an eyebrow, amused. Who said anything about her looking like an angel? Revan had just crossed the threshold into a new chapter of his life. His body was changing, and with it, his perceptions. The familiar feelings of adolescence were creeping in, like the way he started noticing girls differently, and the shift in his voice becoming deeper, as if a reminder of the person he was becoming. However, it wasn't until his brother's voice broke through his thoughts that he was snapped back to the present. "Morning, Revan." Qui-Gon's voice was calm, cutting through the awkwardness of the moment. Revan turned to see the Jedi Master standing at the doorway, with Jar Jar Binks nervously trailing behind him, peering out at the towering jungle of skyscrapers. The Gungan was clearly out of his element, overwhelmed by the sheer size of the structures, so different from the peaceful swamps of Naboo. And while Revan stood still, caught between the weight of his past and the uncertainty of his future, his brother's teasing words offered a strange comfort in a world that seemed to shift under his feet. The Force was calling to him, but what would it mean for him to answer? That was the question that haunted him, even as the skyline of Coruscant loomed ever closer. Revan walked down the corridor, with a brief glance of sympathy toward the Gungan as he passed by. Though he'd only known him for a couple of days, the Gungan seemed harmless, clumsy. Yes, but harmless. Revan spotted the Queen by the boarding ramp and decided to head to the throne room instead, knowing Captain Panaka would be keeping a close eye on her now that they were at Coruscant, a place where danger could lurk. As he entered the empty throne room, he turned to his companion. "Now that we're alone, do you want to talk about your dream?" Revan looked down, his voice barely above a whisper. "I dreamt of Malak," he confessed, the weight of the revelation settling on him. It was clear now everything that had happened to his friend was somehow tied to him, to the path he'd chosen or was yet to choose. Qui-Gon, sensing the gravity of the moment, asked, "I don't think you've mentioned Malak before." The room felt heavy, as if the Force itself was waiting for Revan to find the answers he feared. Revan was on the edge, consumed by unsettling Force dreams as the ship approached Coruscant. His mind clung to the past, struggling to make sense of the visions where he faced Darth Malak, his former friend turned adversary. Haunted by memories of the Starforge, a galactic war, and a dark legacy, Revan wondered if he was destined to remain a Jedi or return to his Sith past. Anakin, full of youthful optimism, looked forward to his Jedi training, unaware of the storm that loomed over them both. Meanwhile, Qui-Gon Jinn saw the deeper truth behind Revan's troubled state. As the ship descended, Revan's internal battle raged. Could he truly escape the shadow of his past, or would it consume him once again? His struggle was just beginning. Qui-Gon lets out a small laugh before shifting his gaze to young Anakin, who's mesmerized by the towering Coruscant skyline racing past the window. "Annie," he calls out. The boy turns eagerly, bright-eyed. "Yeah?" Qui-Gon tells him they'll return shortly, needing a private word with his brother. Anakin, catching the edge of the conversation, tilts his head. "About becoming a Jedi?" he asks, eyeing them both with hope. "Of sorts," Qui-Gon replies. Anakin's face tightens, not in fear, but in challenge. "Then why can't I come?" The question lands with more weight than intended, less curiosity and more defiance, like a boy already daring the galaxy to hold him back. In the shadows of the Force, a young Revan Skywalker wrestles with haunting dreams of a past life he doesn't remember. As the visions unfold, he is confronted by his former friend, Malak, and a hidden war that once ravaged the galaxy. Struggling with the weight of his destiny, Revan is torn between the path of the Jedi and the pull of darkness that he can't escape. Meanwhile, Anakin, full of hope, dreams of becoming a Jedi, unaware of the fate that awaits him. Qui-Gon Jinn, witnessing their turmoil, knows the boys are destined for greatness, but will the Jedi Council see it too? As Revan's nightmares blend with reality, he must decide whether to embrace the light or succumb to the darkness of his past. The Force calls, but where will it lead? The legacy of the Starforge looms large, and the battle for their future is only just beginning. Is this conversation helpful so far? Revan glanced at Anakin with reassurance. "Don't worry, Annie. The old man just wants to teach me some proper etiquette before we meet the council." Qui-Gon, though briefly annoyed at the remark, kept his thoughts in check, his mind wandering to the troubling idea that the council had once denied training the boys. As they neared Coruscant, he hoped he'd have enough time to search the archives, looking for records on Alec, Mitra, and others mentioned by Revan. Anakin, however, was unimpressed, muttering, "Sounds boring," his eyes fixed on the massive skyscraper stretching far into the clouds. "Well, now that Anakin is captivated by the sights, shall we be off?" Qui-Gon suggested, stepping aside and gesturing toward the main corridor where the Queen and her handmaidens, including Padme, waited at the ramp's end. As Revan broods in silence and Anakin gazes wide-eyed at the stars, a lone Gungan dares to break the tension. "Let's go!" But the old Jedi's voice cuts like a saber. "No, Jar Jar." The look he gives could flatten suns. "You stay here and watch over Anakin." The Gungan, crestfallen, protests in his usual clumsy flair. "Messa no knows how's to fly a shippa." But Qui-Gon, already aged by burden and visions, doesn't blink. "Anything," he repeats, locking eyes and tightening the warning like a vice. Jar Jar finally shrinks, murmuring a defeated "Okesa" as the shadows stretch long around the ship. Qui-Gon's voice rang out with a steady tone. "Remember, don't touch anything. I mean nothing." Jar Jar flinched, offended by the lack of trust. "Mesa won't," he protested, feeling hurt despite his occasional clumsiness. He would never put the ship or the crew in danger. They were his friends. Qui-Gon, a little more patient this time, muttered, "All right, just making sure," before he turned his attention forward. "Let's go, Revan." The air was thick with unspoken words as they set off, a tension lingering between them, like an ancient storm waiting to break. Revan walked down the corridor, with Qui-Gon leading the way and the Gungan trailing behind. Although he didn't know the Gungan well, only having met him 2 days ago, he couldn't help but feel a little sympathy for him. He seemed clumsy but harmless. As they approached the Queen near the boarding ramp, Qui-Gon decided it was safer to head to the throne room, as the Queen would be well guarded, especially with Coruscant now in their sights, a perfect place for an assassin to strike. Inside the throne room, Qui-Gon turned to Revan, who had been unusually quiet. "Now that we're alone, want to talk about your dream?" he asked softly, like a father to his child. Revan's gaze dropped to the floor. "I dreamt of Malak," he murmured, more quietly than he'd intended. "It was a dream full of regret, a revelation of the past, and how his actions had shaped their tragic future. I don't think you've mentioned this, Malak, before. Qui-Gon remarked, sensing there was more to this story than Revan let on. Revan was haunted by strange visions deep within his mind. He saw the past, where he faced off with Darth Malak, his former friend Alec. The two once shared ambition, but now they were enemies, caught in a bitter rivalry. Revan's dreams showed the galaxy burning under the weight of Malak's rage, their shared history tangled with betrayal and darkness. As they landed on Coruscant, Revan struggled with a terrifying question. Was he a Jedi reborn? Or was he slipping into the darkness once more? Meanwhile, Anakin was full of hope, contrasting Revan's growing dread, and Qui-Gon, sensing the depth of Revan's torment, feared the visions weren't mere nightmares, but a dark legacy slowly returning to claim him. It had to be a coincidence. There was no other explanation. The twist of fate that led Revan to meet someone who would one day take the name of Malak, it was simply too unbelievable. His curiosity pushed him to ask, despite the forcefulness in his voice. If his hunch was correct, no, it couldn't be, but the Force! It had always shaped destinies in strange ways, binding people together while tearing the galaxy apart. But what if there was even the slightest chance that the impossible could happen? How would the Jedi react to such a revelation? And more importantly, how would the galaxy respond if the truth ever came to light? Revan found himself aboard a massive automated shipyard, a relic from an ancient time. Malak, his former ally, called it the Star Forge, a creation of the savage Rakatan species. The stories were whispered among Jedi and historians alike, and Revan had always believed them. The Star Forge was capable of producing endless ships, droids, and weapons, giving its master a terrifying power. This dark artifact had been the tool used by Revan and Malak to wage a brutal war against the Jedi, igniting what came to be known as the Jedi Civil War. But that was before Revan's defeat of Malak and the Republic's destruction of the Forge. Now, in the midst of these haunting memories, Revan is confronted with his past as the lines between dreams and reality blur, leaving him wondering who he truly is and what darkness still calls to him. Revan finds himself haunted by intense Force dreams where he confronts his former friend Alec, now Darth Malak, on the Star Forge. The visions reveal a shared past filled with galactic wars, betrayal, and the rise of a Sith Emperor. As Revan listens to Malak's bitter accusations, he realizes the truth in his words. It was his own actions that set his friend down the dark path. Yet, in the end, it was Malak's own choices that sealed his fate. Torn between the light and the dark, Revan struggles to understand whether he is destined to become a Jedi or if he is simply a Sith reborn. The haunting dreams leave him questioning his identity and his legacy. As a dark past continues to influence the present, Revan stood solemnly, his hands clasped behind his back, offering wisdom with a heavy heart. It's easy to blame ourselves, wondering what we could have done differently. But in the end, we are responsible for our own actions, he said. Unlike droids, we're not programmed to follow blindly. Every choice, whether Jedi or Sith, is ours to make. Even knowing the Jedi have lost their way, I choose to stay with them, just as Alec chose the Sith path. His voice cracked with guilt. If my visions are true, I'm the one who set this path into motion. Alec, he was my best friend, and I caused him so much pain. Just then, the ship's intercom crackled to life. Rick's voice calling out, "Attention! We have arrived at the landing pad," cutting through Revan's torment before he could say more. As the transmission ended, a mocking remark echoed in the air. "Please take your belongings and thank you for flying air, Rick." The speaker's smirk was evident even without the face-to-face exchange. The journey ahead was uncertain, and Qui-Gon, sensing the weight of what lay before them, placed a comforting hand on Revan's shoulder. "We'll talk about this more once we meet the Council," he said, his voice steady but laced with anticipation. Revan, however, felt the tension rising within him. "Do you think they'll be able to help?" he asked, eyes filled with doubt. Qui-Gon's answer was reassuring, a glimpse of the wisdom that had carried him through countless trials. "I know they will," he assured, his tone unwavering, before adding, "And if they can't, Master Yoda definitely will." His hand patted Revan's shoulder with a gentle confidence, reminding him that, when it came to the Force, no one knew more than the Grandmaster. Revan muttered with doubt, "If you say so," but inwardly clung to his own path. He chose for now to trust the Jedi Master, though a storm churned beneath his calm. If they rejected him, if the Jedi turned their backs, he would return to Tatooine and find his mother. She was still enslaved, but he was not. He could work, he could fight, he could buy her freedom. And if the boy was denied too, then Revan, Anakin, HK, and his mother would carve out a quiet life on a distant world. Somewhere free, somewhere far from legacies and legends.